had the best speed of any player he's ever played with when it came to your putting. And he described how you would slice putts, you would hook putts, you would putt him off the toe. And this all speaks to just the creative and the feel that you have to be a good putter, and especially for Augusta National.
They called Ben Crenshaw the greatest putter ever, and if you stood on the same green as him, if you were one of the players who had to watch that ball roll toward the hole from places it had absolutely no business going in, you did not feel inspired. You felt something else. You felt the slow, creeping, gut-sinking realization that no matter what you did that day, no matter how perfect your ball striking was or how steady your nerves were, this one quiet man with his old beat-up putter was going to take something from you, something you could not get back. He did not shout. He did not pump his fist after every make. He just walked up to the ball, looked at the line, and stroked it. And it went in. It always seemed to go in. Not sometimes. Not on the big moments. Always. And that was the terrifying part. How does a calm, easygoing man from Austin, Texas, nicknamed Gentle Ben, become the most feared putter in the history of professional golf? How does a player so quiet, so unhurried, so completely without ego on the green, end up being the one name that made other tour pros feel helpless just by showing up on the same course? That is what this video is about. And once you hear what the legends of this game actually said about him, you will understand exactly why that word, terrifying, is the only one that fits. Also, if this story is already pulling you in, tap the hype feature and give this video some hype right now. It helps other golf fans find stories like this one. Now let us get into it. Picture Masters Week. Not 1984, not 1995, a recent one. Smiley Kaufman, a PGA Tour winner, and one of the sharpest minds covering the game today, sat down with Ben Crenshaw for a conversation during tournament week at Augusta. And almost immediately, Kaufman said what so many in the golf world already feel, but rarely say out loud this plainly. He looked at Ben and told him that one of the very first things he thinks about with his game is how great he was with the putter. Just like that. No warm-up, no easing into it, no tiptoeing around the subject. Because when you think of Ben Crenshaw, the putter is where your mind goes first, at every time. It is not the wins, though there were plenty. It is not the swing, though it was beautiful. It is the putting. It is always the putting. Kaufman also brought up what Justin Leonard had said about Ben. Leonard, a major champion himself, had called Ben's speed control the best any player had ever seen. Speed control is everything in putting. It is the difference between a ball that lips out and a ball that falls. A ball arriving too fast has almost no room for error. A ball that dies right at the hole can fall from any angle, left, right, or center. Ben Crenshaw made the hole bigger for himself than it was for everyone else on tour. He did it through feel and instinct that took a lifetime to develop. That is what Kaufman was pointing to. And the fact that a modern broadcaster sitting with a legend still marvels at it after all these years tells you the legend has not faded. It has only grown. Now let us understand where all of this came from. Ben grew up in Austin, Texas, and his putting teacher was Harvey Pennick. Pennick was not the kind of teacher who broke things into angles and numbers. He did not talk about shoulder tilt or face angle at impact or any of the mechanics that were starting to take over golf instruction at the time. He believed in fingers and feel. He believed the putter should be an extension of your nervous system, not a tool you controlled with your big muscles. He believed the best putters were born with instinct, and that a teacher's job was to protect that instinct, not replace it with a system. So that is what he did for Ben. He protected it, nurtured it, gave it room to grow into something the game had never quite seen before. Some players learn putting like math. Ben learned it like music. That difference is what made him nearly impossible to figure out and nearly impossible to beat. Ben also had a weapon. He used the same putter for almost his entire career. A Wilson 8802, received as a gift when he turned 15. He called it Little Ben. The 8802 is a heel-shafted blade with significant toe flow and no offset. For most players, it is notoriously difficult to use. It has a very small sweet spot, and any shot hit even slightly off-center tells you immediately. But that is exactly why Ben loved it. That feedback ran straight through the shaft and into his hands on every single stroke. And because his feel was so refined, that information made him sharper, not confused. It let him control the speed of every putt the way a musician controls volume. Soft when soft was needed, firm when the moment called for firmness. Always dialed in, always exactly right. Now let us count down the legends who explained, in their own words, just how terrifying Ben Crenshaw really was. We are going in reverse order, saving the most powerful voice for last. Number 9 is Jim Nelford. Nelford was behind the microphone at the 1995 Masters, calling the action live when Crenshaw walked up the 18th fairway, and the weight of everything that week came rushing to the surface all at once. What Nelford said in that moment has stayed with people ever since. He described the scene. So many people, so silent. Ben Crenshaw winning the Masters for a second time, holding back the emotion all week, keeping it checked until that very last moment on that very last green. And then Nelford said that there was no greater tribute to the man Ben loved, Harvey Penick, than that picture right there. That the picture spoke for itself. Those are not the words of a broadcaster reading from a script. Those are the words of a man who understood what he was watching and knew it was bigger than a golf tournament. The fact that Nelford, a former tour pro himself, was so moved tells you everything about the size of what Ben did that week. Number 8 is Greg Norman. Norman was the world number 1 at the time. He was powerful and aggressive and used to bending tournaments to his will. He built his career on taking over golf courses with length. He was not beaten by a smarter game plan. He was beaten by something he could not see, touch, or prepare for. That is the Crenshaw terror in its purest form. The world number 1 walking away speechless. Number 7 is Davis Love III. Love finished just 1 stroke behind Crenshaw at that 1995 Masters. 1 shot. And he has spoken about that week many times since, always with a kind of wonder in his voice. Love said that there was always a little magic around Ben, that he was driven and charged and obviously one of the greatest putters ever. Driven and charged? Think about those words in context. Ben had just buried his mentor days before the tournament began. He came to Augusta carrying grief that would have broken most competitors before they even teed it up. And yet the grief did not slow him down. It seemed to lift him. Love felt it. Norman felt it. The entire field felt it. And not one of them could match it. Number 6 is David Feherty. Feherty is one of the most honest and vivid voices the game has ever produced. When he talks about a player, he does not reach for safe or polished language. He reaches for the truth. He has competed against the best in the world on both the European Tour and the PGA Tour, so when he describes what it felt like to watch someone putt, he is speaking from experience that most people simply do not have. So when Feherty described watching Ben Crenshaw on the greens, what he said carried real weight. He said it was like watching a man possessed. He described the stroke as silky and precise in a way that made other professionals feel helpless. Helpless. Not frustrated. Not challenged. Helpless. Because the ability Ben had did not come from something you could study or copy or counter with extra practice. It lived in his fingers and his instincts and a lifetime of feel. When Ben walked onto a green, Feherty said, the atmosphere changed. There was a quiet intimidation that had nothing to do with swagger or aggression. It was the intimidation of a man who simply knew something other players did not. Feherty called it almost supernatural. He was not being dramatic, he was being accurate. Number 5 is Tom Watson. Watson is one of the greatest to ever play this game. 8 major championships, a legendary competitor and a legendary putter in his own right. When Watson speaks about putting, every serious golfer listens. Watson was right there in the final round of the 1984 Masters, locked in a battle with Crenshaw for the green jacket. On the 10th hole, something happened that Watson never forgot. The 10th at Augusta is a long, punishing par 4 that drops steeply downhill to a green, tilting hard from right to left. Crenshaw had a long, difficult putt. The wise play was to lag it close and take the par. Instead, Ben holed it, confident, unhurried, like he had already watched it go in before he ever pulled the putter back. Watson stood there and called it an omen. Not a great shot, not a momentum shift, an omen, something foretelling what was coming. Watson later reflected that Crenshaw and one other player were the 2 best putters of their entire generation, and that putting is all in the fingers and all in the feel. For Watson to say that a man who had made clutch putts on the biggest stages in the world tells you that what he saw from Ben that day was in a category he rarely encountered. Number 4 is Tiger Woods. In a conversation with his longtime coach Butch Harmon, Tiger Woods said something that stopped people cold. He admitted that when he was in college and during his first couple of years on the PGA Tour, he was actively trying to putt like Ben Crenshaw. Tiger Woods, the man most considered the greatest golfer who ever lived, the most clutch putter in the history of the sport, was watching Ben Crenshaw and trying to copy him. Harmon added that other tour pros would gather on the practice green to watch Ben, not to steal the technique because it was too personal and too individual to replicate, but simply to observe, to be near something they could only admire. When the greatest player the game has ever seen looks at you as a benchmark, the conversation about the greatest putter is effectively over. Number 3 is Tom Kite. Kite's connection to Ben goes deeper than any other name on this list. They grew up together, they trained under the same teacher, they competed side by side at the University of Texas, and then for decades on tour. Kite watched Ben Crenshaw putt from the very beginning, through the development, through the early wins, through the majors and the near misses and the masterpieces. And in his Hall of Fame induction speech, Kite said that the best putters he had ever been around in his entire life were his own family and his friend Ben. His family, that is not a quote you throw out lightly. He talked about how you could stand next to Ben on the practice green, watch every single detail of what he was doing, and still walk away unable to teach it to anyone else. Other elite putters, men who had given their careers to mastering this craft, stood on the sideline and watched Ben and knew they were in the presence of something that simply could not be taught. Roberts understood the craft better than almost anyone alive, and even he stood in awe. Number 1 is Brad Faxon. Faxon is ranked among the greatest putters in the history of the game. Full stop. He has spent his entire professional life studying, practicing, and thinking about putting more deeply than almost anyone. His opinion on the subject carries more weight than nearly any voice in golf. And in a conversation with Scotty Cameron, Faxon said it plainly and without any hesitation at all. Ben Crenshaw is the greatest putter who ever lived, not among the greatest. The greatest. Faxon explained that Ben's feel and touch existed in a category that no mechanical instruction could ever reach or replicate. He pointed out that Ben let his head and his knees move naturally through the stroke, things that modern coaches would flag immediately as flaws, but which were actually the hidden source of his rhythmic, flowing, utterly consistent genius. Faxon had competed at the highest level for decades. He had watched every great putter of his era up close, and his conclusion was not complicated. Ben Crenshaw stood alone. Now let us go back to 1995 one final time, because it deserves it and it always will. Harvey Penick passed away just days before the Masters began that year. Ben served as a pallbearer on a Wednesday. He stood at the graveside of the man who had shaped him as a golfer and as a person. And then he drove to Augusta, and he played golf. Over 72 holes on the fastest and most demanding greens in professional golf, Ben Crenshaw did not three-putt a single time. Zero, not once. At Augusta National, where the greens run at speeds that can reach 13 or 14 on the Stimpmeter, going the entire tournament without a three-putt is something almost no one does under normal circumstances. Doing it while carrying grief, while honoring a man he loved, while the whole world watched and waited, is something that defies ordinary explanation. It sits in a place beyond statistics. Ben said later that it felt like Harvey had given him a 15th club that week, an invisible one, the most powerful one in the bag. And when you look at the numbers, when you understand what 0-3 putts for 72 holes at Augusta actually means, you start to believe him. That is why Ben Crenshaw was terrifying. Not because he was loud, not because he was aggressive or physically dominant. He was none of those things. He was terrifying because of certainty. Quiet, complete, unshakable certainty. The kind built over a lifetime under one of the wisest teachers the game has known. The kind that meant no lead was safe, no distance was too great, no slope was too difficult. He would hole a long birdie early and let you know his feel was fully dialed in for the day. Then he would miss a green and convert a nasty 15-footer for par, taking the momentum right out of your hands before you even realized what was happening. By the time the back nine arrived, opponents would start pressing. They would take risks they did not need to take. They would aim at pins they should have avoided, not because the course forced them to, but because somewhere deep in their chest they already knew. The ball was going in. It had been going in all day. It was always going in, and they could not stop it, could not slow it down, and could not find an answer for it no matter how well they played their own game. That is the legacy of Gentle Ben. Not just 2 green jackets, not just a beautiful stroke, but a full generation of the best players in the world. Players who had seen everything, competed against everyone, and thought they had prepared for any scenario the game could throw at them. Who stood on those greens, watched him putt, and felt something quiet and cold move through them. Something they had never felt against any other player in their entire careers. Because they knew, with a terrifying and complete clarity, that no matter what they did, they were watching something they could not stop. If you love this one, please like this video and subscribe so you never miss a story like this. Drop a comment down below and tell us your favorite Ben Crenshaw memory or the putt that stays with you the most. We read every single one, and we appreciate every comment more than you know. Ben Crenshaw deserved every single word of this one. We hope you felt every bit of that too.